Hello, and welcome to Mozart of Hoops, a podcast that takes a deep dive into the world of basketball, how we learn to appreciate its beauty, and understand the ebbs and flows of the game. My name is Ian Quinn, and I am joined by my two co-hosts, Chris and Owen. Chris, how are you doing today?
Oh, I'm furious after a morning of playing 2K, so I'm primed to split hairs and
Oh, there you go.
argue over tedious details that probably don't matter.
Well, that's one way to start, and we will be very tedious today. So this might be a good day for you. Owen, how about you? How are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing all right, guys. I'm a bit tired though because Ian had to get us up at the butt crack of noon to record this podcast.
Even
Yeah,
though
Um,
dude
sorry.
was pushing for 3 hours earlier.
Yeah, even though Dunas was, pushing for a 7 a.m. start for us, yeah, got us up way too early. I'm so
yeah, no,
sorry
that
about
would have
that.
been best. We would have been on our A game.
Yeah. Uh, so yeah, I've been doing pretty good myself.
That Mamba mentality, Ian.
Yeah, that's true. We should have that Mamba mentality. But yeah, I've been really loving the playoffs so far, even though some of the games have been a little rough to watch. Just some good quality games so far. The you know Milwaukee Boston series is going to 7, so that's probably been the best series thus far in the playoffs. Um, so that's been good. I've been really enjoying basketball a lot lately. So let's dive in here. So today we will be starting our first podcast series. It's going to be called and it's a topic that the three of us have been discussing for quite some time. The art of the passing big. I know I got a little fancy with the name there. So this first episode, however, I think all three of us kind of want to do this. It's going to be spent as like a prologue of sorts. We want to begin with our definitions of what exactly the big man role is. I know, having talked with both of you on this, we seem rather far apart on this, on how we view this. So, Chris, I know you said you had something you wanted to say right away.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's that we're far apart so much as just there's no accepted definitions for these things, maybe, or if there is, I don't know whose definition we're using. There's not a Merriam-Webster basketball dictionary that we go off of, to define these positions. So, when we say big, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, yeah. Owen, do you have any thoughts on this? I know
Yeah.
you.
For me, it just seemed like we've been talking about this podcast idea for a while. And I always came back to the point that every time we talked about it, we just ended up talking about, well, what's a big? Is PJ Tucker a big? Can he pass? We just kept getting deeper and deeper into the weeds about positions and titles. And I figured we need to actually discuss that before we actually talk about passing bigs.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good idea. I think it's better to have some idea of what we're actually talking about, because I could list somebody that other people don't view as a big, or it's a very broad definition, in my opinion. Um, I don't I I'm trying to figure out if I don't know if I think that I don't know. I don't know. I'm so
Well,
lost on
okay.
exactly what it is.
So let's start at the very beginning of basketball, as most of us know it, like back in the black and white 50s. So you have, your traditional positions really haven't changed at all since then, at least the labels we put on them. So the roles those players, assume on different sides of the court has changed over time because it's a lot more about the skills that a player has than, the name of the position you're putting on them. But it originated that way for a reason. So, back in the old days. I mean, I think the main principle of basketball is, and in basketball has actually kind of gotten back to this a little bit lately with analytics, as far as, everything is about layups and dunks or threes. Like, you want to get as close as you possibly can, or you want the 3 points. So before we have a 3-point line, the name of the game is get the ball as close as possible. So you need tall guys close to the rim who can get the ball around that area and give your team the best advantage, when it comes to scoring the ball. So I think that's where, we're kind of starting from. And that is what the center's job was, or, the pivot man, the big, was to, kind of camp out on that block and get as close to the rim as possible because he had the best chance to score.
Yeah, that's a very good way to start. And I think that it has evolved through time. Where Owen just mentioned PJ Tucker. PJ Tucker is not big. He's by definition not a big. But he was playing that 5 role on a playoff team in the Rockets. So I don't know. Owen, what are your thoughts on this exactly?
Basically, just what Chris said, getting into it historically, as in like the role of a big man, a 5, a center, was roughly a play finisher on offense, or just someone that you have close to the basket to defend the rim, being the tallest or biggest player. It has definitely been muddied as of late. One of your favorite players, Ian, Nikola Jokic, does he necessarily fit the role of a traditional center?
Well, I think I've mentioned this. I think he's more of a unicorn. I don't really think he's kind of how I've changed my view on positions in general. I'm absolutely a positionless fan. I don't think that there needs to be a definition or a defined role for every player on a team. Jokic, when he's on offense, is the point guard. I guess I'm giving him a position, but he's you know he's just so different than the other bigs of what we've seen. I've talked about Bill Walton, we've talked about Wilt Chamberlain, we've talked about Shaq. None of them were exactly doing what Jokic does. I've never seen somebody of Jokic's size do what he does. So I guess, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna call him that because he does do work in the post. So I guess I would call him a big.
I mean, he's obviously a big because he's,
Because he's big.
He's humongous, right? So, like, that's obvious. I think the question is, where do we draw the line here? Like, there are certain guys we all know are bigs because they're undeniably big guys. Like, they jump better, they guard the biggest guy, they stay as close to the basket as they can. Typically, they, there's a whole lot of characteristics that probably everybody is already has in their mind about this, and putting the labels on it is something different, I guess, and defining all those. But it's just how far exactly do you veer toward the edge of that definition when we're casting this net that we're going to talk about passing bigs. So because there's teams have power forwards that are typically, not much smaller than the center. And that guy also oftentimes is able to play backup minutes at the center position. There are some teams who have run out, 2 centers basically, and just, one of them gets called a power forward. So, yeah, I don't know. There's, yeah, I don't know. I don't know where to draw the line still when we talk about that. So yeah. I mean, I'm willing. Yeah, go ahead.
No, just how Ian brought up Jokic being a unicorn, something that we haven't seen before from a big, the stuff that he's doing out there on the floor. But that led me to think, is a power forward going to be called a big? Is somebody who's really, like 6'9", 6'10", is that a big? And so then I think, but I have seen some of what Jokic does, and I saw that with like Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. So are they not bigs?
Well, I
Not as
think
big as him.
this is they're not as big as Jokic. Sorry,
Not as
point,
big.
point
But I mean,
invalid. No, I'm kidding. But yeah, I think that it's actually interesting to talk about. I know you've mentioned Bird and Magic. I mentioned Dr. J as possibly getting center minutes, 5 minutes, big minutes, I guess, in an era like this today. And I think that it's an interesting thought experiment. I mean, we've seen Magic play center before. I mean, if anybody watches Winning Time, you would have seen it. But I don't think I'm willing to call Bird and Magic bigs. And it's not because they can't play it. It's just that's yeah, I mean, it's just such a broad definition. I can't even every time I'm like, yeah, you know what? No, they're not a big, and I'm gonna say something. It just comes back to me. It's like, well, maybe they actually can be.
Yeah,
Like
that's the problem. Yeah.
if PJ Tucker is able to be effective as a 5 in this era, then yeah, Bird and Magic should be effective at the 5 in this era. So,
And I can't tell you why they wouldn't be, to be honest. Like that's I guess
yeah,
the issue. That's where this gets tricky because if you want to say like, okay, well they didn't play that position at the time, right? But then there are guys who play center now or who are bigs now that wouldn't have been when those guys played, but they would be fair game because they're playing that position. And I really can't see why Bird or Magic wouldn't be successful small ball centers just because of the things they're able to do. That I mean, they're giving it up on defense, but certain matchups, like that's not a problem.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's a problem either. And I mentioned Dr. J as well. I actually think Dr. J would be a really interesting small ball 5 in today's era. It'd actually be a lot of fun thinking about it.
It seems like looking back at some of the stuff that they actually did in the old ABA that really was way, way further ahead of its time than even people who have called it ahead of its time even realized.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think that I'm trying to think of somebody that I could see as like a small ball 5 that I watched recently, and the first one that comes to mind, he didn't start there because they have Alonzo Mourning, but I was watching the Celtics versus the Hornets in the 1993 first round, and to start the second quarter, the Hornets went small, and Larry Johnson was their center for a time being. Now, defensively, that's probably not the best, but he was very effective at it. He was, moving the ball effectively. He was scoring at will in the post because he's strong as hell. I think I've said before, he reminds me a lot of Zion Williamson. But I think that if somebody like Larry Johnson who can do that, who isn't he shorter technically than Julius Irving?
Larry Johnson?
I believe they're. I think they're like the same height, or at least they're listed the same height.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So to me, it seems like I could totally see somebody like Julius Irving being a big in today's era for certain lineups. I don't think full time. I don't think that's the best idea, but I do think for certain lineups it would actually be really fun. And I think that my definition of positions is just I don't think it overly matters. I think that I would want the 5 best guys possible out on the court. That's kind of how I view it.
Okay, well,
don't
then
know.
when talking about a big, do you think it's more important speaking about their offense or their defense in terms of relating them to the position? So, like with Julius Irving, like on offense, I mean, is he really going to be doing that many like traditional 5 things, or is he still going to be more of like a 3-4? Whereas on defense, you know,
Yeah, that's a great.
how are you going to be viewing them?
Yeah, it's probably it's the defensive role for sure. I think because that's where you see the most
Yeah.
variability among roles. Period is on the offensive end. Which modern basketball has become all about matchups and switching and stuff like that to account for some of that. Just because I think you've seen a lot more variability in skills and abilities and things that teams are trying to leverage in certain players, where you never saw that stuff before. It was basically, this is what we want out of our 5. We want, you need to have a sound hook shot, or, you need to have solid footwork, and, I mean, just certain, skills that as a traditional point guard, there were certain things that were always expected of you, as far as being a pass first playmaker and quarterback for your team and stuff like that. So, those archetypes have kind of been built up just to be deconstructed over the years, because all of competition is basically about, figuring out where to gain some kind of an advantage, zig when everybody else is zagging, but you have to do it at the right time and in the right way. And as we all know, like, people are not all, like, we're not all cookie cutter. Like, I've seen people, you can play pickup basketball and just observe like the variability and skills among different body types. And there are people who don't look like they should be able to do certain things that they could do. Or you're like, boy, if you only had so-and-so's body, you would be amazing. I mean, I've seen
Yeah.
300-pound, 5'9" linemen just knock down 35 footers one after another like it was nothing. And it's like, okay, well, this guy's, clearly that's not, he's never going to play basketball like that. But boy, in a different body,
you don't
he could kill it.
You don't need to do James Harden like that, but
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, yeah.
And
So,
that's actually an archetype we will get into, is those bigger, like legitimately big guys and their passing capabilities. But I want to see how far we can push the boundaries of this, what a big is.
Russell Westbrook. Is he
okay, that's exactly what I was just going to ask. Yeah, because he was part of that microball experiment. I don't think so. I really don't. I don't see him guarding 5s.
no.
So if we're looking at it from a defensive thing, no. I don't see that.
And I think there has to be some differentiation also, like maybe, and this is where like the PJ Tucker line is, and maybe that's what we could start calling this, but because like there's a point at which, okay, that big role is nominal because there are no bigs out there, and it's kind of a gimmicky deal. Like you're zagging a lot to counter the zigs, if that makes sense.
And also, I think that, yeah, PJ Tucker was playing the 5, but I don't think PJ Tucker would have been able to play the 5 if Robert Covington wasn't there. Do we agree with that? Disagree?
No, I think in spurt minutes, of course, he'd still be able to play the 5. When you get down to it, I mean, like Jokic having to play the 5, he still needs some sort of support as well. Everybody needs support in whatever position they're playing, especially on defense.
Yeah, what I meant is, do we think Robert Covington was actually the 5? Do we think that?
But see, then we're getting back into the role of a 5. I mean, PJ Tucker, was he defending what we would want to call the 5 on the other team?
I don't really know. Well, first off, I'm not totally familiar with their whole defensive scheme.
Because typically we're watching PJ Tucker with post defense, and
Yes.
Mhm.
Going back to the
Yes.
traditional role of the five, that is where the center or the big would be and would be being defended. So it does seem like Tucker is playing that role.
Yeah, and obviously, it's, Robert Covington's main role. He's a help guy. He's a help defender. He's one of the best at it. So yeah, I think that, PJ Tucker is the 5, and the reason I mentioned that is because of the rim protection aspect that Covington has compared to Tucker. Do we think that someone protecting the rim is more so a 5, or is that
I think that
up for?
it just depends.
Because Derek White's a damn good
Yeah.
rim protector.
Well,
So
no, because then it leads to is a roamer going to be considered a big? Is somebody that provides the weak side help? Is that a big, or does it have to be the primary post defender?
yeah. It's so broad of what it could be versus
Well,
what it.
this is why
Yeah.
maybe I think if we're gonna go, power forward center role type players, that's kind of you're picking up both of those guys then, because that's usually what it is. And it's not that there aren't other like wings who have good rim protection as well, but it's just that's what it's a skill that's way more common in the big guys. Taller players.
Yeah, and here's the other thing too: is like, how big is Wes Unseld?
6'7",
Not very big. Yeah, 6'7",
250 or so.
Right. He's, he was. Alvin Hayes was bigger than him, right?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
But Unseld was the one playing center for the Bullets. So I don't really think height can be defined by what a big is.
But see, that goes back to like what Chris talked about. Some teams would throw 2 centers out there, or roughly a center. I mean, the Bullets were one of those teams. I mean, Elvin Hayes, by all intents and purposes, is a center. He was doing center things. Like you talk about Marcus Camby a lot, Ian. Elvin Hayes, very similar things.
Yeah, only a lot more volume.
Touch more volume. He liked to shoot a bit more. But no, I agree. And I was thinking about how we were the last episode of Winning Time just recently happened. And I was looking at the starting lineup for the Sixers in that game where Magic started at center. They were also starting 2 centers. They were running Caldwell Jones and Daryl Dawkins. And what's funny is
3 centers, right? Julius Erving.
Oh yeah, you're right. There's another big. Is Maurice Cheeks a big? No, okay. Let's not get that far. Let's not get that far in the rabbit hole.
Too early for that joke.
But and it's funny because aren't the Cavaliers, the very current Cavaliers, the 2022 Cleveland Cavaliers, aren't they running 3 bigs?
Yeah, I was just going to mention them. Yeah, technically they are.
They're completely going against what everybody else was. They're zagging while everybody else is zigging, because you look at it and everybody was starting to go towards that small ballish type. Not everybody, but that seemed to be where the future was. And then the Cavs come in and they're starting Lauri Markkanen, Evan Mobley, and Jarrett Allen, who are 3 7-footers. I mean,
that mobility is like, you can only do it if you have enough mobility out there, because otherwise, teams have certainly tried this before, failed big experiments. Why wouldn't teams just put 5 7-footers out there if that was going to give you the greatest advantage?
Well, Michael Malone tried that in the summer league. Well, not Michael Malone, but the Nuggets did.
Yes, I remember that.
I think the starting lineup was like Jokic at point,
Yeah,
Jeremy Grant at shooting guard, or it was a preseason game, so it was Malone. Small forward was like Was it
Wasn't a
Bol?
Yeah.
Yeah, Bol. Power forward was Paul Millsap, and then center was Mason Plumlee.
Right. So why wouldn't you
So
do that all the time?
I don't know. I wish people did.
But there's a reason they don't.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, they can't. I I don't think Jokic is somebody who's going to be able to keep up with quick guards. And
Right. And even
we saw
going
that in the
back,
playoffs.
go back. I mean, we don't even have to think about this modern wise. Like, think about, because we all know now, like, they're, teams very purposefully hunt mismatches to get, smaller, quicker guys on bigger guys so that they can abuse them like that. But back in the day, think about, okay, team, I think the thing is, it's more accepted that, everything was pounded to the inside before the 3-point line, which is largely true. I mean, the offenses were compacted in there. So, oh crap! I just lost my train of thought.
It's okay. It happens. Yeah, I know what you mean. You know, the reason why it does, like you mentioned, the reason why it does work is because of the mobility and because of the spacing value. That a guy like Markkanen has. Markkanen is, you know, he's not my favorite player in the world, but he certainly can shoot the ball. So his ability to be able to spread out, and same with Mobley. Mobley's able to, space out to the 3-point line. That allows somebody like a Jarrett Allen to thrive more. And their defense was really good. I know Markkanen is not exactly the best defender, but he seemed to be amplified by playing next to guys like Mobley and Allen. So yeah, I think that you have to have the right type of big,
Yeah.
and somebody like Markkanen and Mobley and Allen. Allen's pretty mobile himself. That's you're able to do that.
Yeah. Thanks for saving me, because that's basically, yeah, I think that's basically where I was trying to go with this. Like, that's the reason it doesn't work, is because, like, usually the tall guys like that, like your traditional bigs, like, you don't find them where they possess the skills of smaller guys so that you can get away with those things that often. That's why those guys are so highly sought after historically, big guys who can handle and put it on the deck. That's an uncommon skill for a big guy, because most of the time those big guys are putting it down and little guys just swat it away, or they dribble it off their foot and stuff like that. So there's certain things that are, highly, highly demanded. And if you can put a team of those, like, kind of, those unicorn type players together, then you have a big advantage. But it is really hard to do because everybody's trying to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes Jokic so special, is there just really isn't anybody else like him right now in terms of being that big, and everybody's trying to find that next guy, but I don't think we found him yet. You know, he's just different. And I know I was listening on listening Sirius XM radio in the car. I had to run errands, and they were talking to Rolando Blackman, and they were asked. The show's called Give and Go with Rick Kamla and Antonio Daniels, and they were asking Rolando Blackman about if he likes how the game has changed. And one of the first players he mentioned was Jokic, in terms of how he's never seen somebody like that big bringing the ball up the court, with all those post moves, with the passing. And he said he would love to play with him today. And I just think that's interesting how, guys from like the 80s are recognizing, like, yeah, this is a bit different, like what we're seeing today. So
what are the advantages of having a passing big guy, perhaps?
Well, I think it can be the hub of the offense. I think you can go to them. An example that I like to use more recently is like a Bam Adebayo. I think that you can use him in a sense where he's not he's not that great offensively. He's like not a great scorer, but he's a pretty good passer, and he can almost, when he gets the ball, he's able to find guys open from the post area. He's more of that traditional passing hub, big, that I think can help open up offenses. I don't know what you guys think about that in terms of what the advantages are.
I mean, totally. But I guess what's different about a big guy passing than a little guy even? Because you could use it doesn't have to be a big, like there's a lot of forwards that were used.
Well, I think I do think like the added height might be.
Yeah, that's where I was going with that, basically.
Yeah, they, one specific pass I can think of is the one when Jokic had like 47 points against the Clippers and it was overtime, and he, had Zubac and Batum all over him, but he was still able to make this like insane cross court pass to Aaron Gordon for the 3 to, pretty much win the game for the Nuggets. I don't think, if let's say that was Jamal Murray, he was a good passer, I don't think he would have been able to make that pass just based off the sheer height advantage that Jokic has. So, yeah, it's definitely having to do with the advantage of it is having to do with the height. And I also think big men can get doubled more, a la Shaq. And if they can develop that passing when they get doubled, then that opens up offenses even more because there's going to be somebody open. So
okay, so before we move on too much further with that, just how you were just speaking about Jokic and his ability, like what he can do from the post, but also bring the ball up the court and create from there. I mean, I hate to do it, but I got to go back to Magic. Does Magic not at least fit that bill on offense? Because he wasn't just, the point guard always bringing up the ball up the floor, everything. Like, he was cutting. He was getting into position in the post. I mean, he was doing all of these things while also, passing out of the post. Does Magic not kind of fit that role? While also being, 6'9", able, like, the best court vision imaginable.
Here's the issue, is you keep bringing up points that I can't really disagree with. Like, I can't think of anything where I'm like, no, he can't. I think Magic's ball handling is a lot better than Jokic's. So that might be the only area where I disagree.
But I mean, even on defense, like he was typically guarding, like the 4 or the 3. So like, does he still not kind of meet these, random requirements?
Yeah, again, I can't disagree. Like I can't.
The whole thing depends. Like, if we're trying to be like if the way we're going to view them is like, okay, where would you be today? Like, if we're factoring that in at all, then the answer is obviously yes, because you would. Geez, I can't imagine a team today having Magic and not running small ball 5 with him, at least some of the time.
Oh,
so I mean, you're doing it for sure. Like, there's no way you're not going to do that. So in that way, it's like, well, God, it's real hard to say that he's not, but it's just our whole lives. We haven't thought of him that way.
Yeah, it's just historically, like, it is just nailed into our brain. Magic Johnson, 6'9" point guard. He is a point guard. The greatest point guard of all time, point guard. But
right,
is he still not a big? I don't know.
Is Luka Doncic a big?
I mean, is he down there, defending DeAndre Ayton?
I don't know if Luka's really doing much of defending, but
his post defense actually isn't that bad. But yeah, at least for a guard, forward, whatever you want to call him.
Yeah, I just think it's curious because a lot of the comparisons to Luka we see today is Magic. I don't necessarily agree fully, but I think that, yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to say if Luka is a big. Luka seems to be a lot more on ball out on the perimeter than even Magic was. So to me, I don't think I would but I was just kind of pushing the boundaries. I don't know what you guys think.
But then, like, if you get into offense, like a point guard, it typically does start from the perimeter, and it's about penetration, creating passes through your drives. Whereas with the big, it's like Bill Russell maybe operating from the elbow or the low post. Just
Or
is
in
that something we
transition.
want to differentiate?
Mm.
Yes, transition.
Yeah, I mean, I mean,
Yeah,
so
that's
broad.
actually probably a very good point. That's probably the best distinction. Well, for offense anyway, probably. It's not that there's no exceptions to that because there's guys
Yeah,
who could use.
there's always going to be an exception
Yeah,
to every one of these
completely.
rules we make.
Yeah, but that's probably okay. That's the way you would think about it. According to the paradigms that we all understand, that makes sense offensively.
Yeah, again, I can't. Every time I try to think of like, well, this could be a way for us to differentiate. There's just something else that comes up that makes me think that anybody could really be a big.
Well, here's the.
I don't know.
No, because I mean, there's always going to be somebody in between. But like when you think about Rod Strickland, like that's a prototypical point guard right there. That's not a big. He's not a big in any way.
I think.
But then you look at the opposite end. You have like George Mirazon. He's not going to be a point guard. He's always going to be a big. There's somebody always in between.
This is probably more about like what are the things like which boxes can you check as opposed to how many other boxes does that guy also check? Like, you know what I mean? Like because these players can add a whole lot of stuff. And really I think all we care about is do you meet these certain minimum qualifications? If you can do a whole lot of other stuff, then more power to you. You're a much more interesting player, odds are. But yeah, I think you would classify as a big if you guards, the biggest guy on the other team in the post on defense. If you're doing that, you probably count as a big. If you yourself are getting most of your offense through the low post, you are probably a big. If you are the tallest guy on your team, you're probably a big. There's just certain, not like every one of these things, but
yeah,
I think you're going to end up identifying the commonalities there.
Yeah. I mean there's a lot of commonalities. There's easy ways to help us with some sort of a guideline. But the same time, I keep going back to PJ Tucker and how he's really not your stereotypical big. He just isn't to me. So I guess, I'll probably name this episode the PJ Tucker line. That was actually really good. That was a really good name there, Milt. So I appreciate that.
That's good.
Yeah.
But then, like, if you want to consider PJ Tucker a big, then it heads into like he's not going to be talked about as a passing big. I'm sorry.
No.
That leads us to like what about Charles Barkley?
Yeah.
And the only reason that's hard
I think Barkley's a big.
Yeah, I guess he is. Yeah. You didn't see him do that PJ Tucker thing on defense, but you probably would.
I don't think Barkley did much on defense.
No, but you would today. He would. Yeah, I think you'd see that. You'd see Barkley small ball 5 stuff for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would actually be good. I actually think running Barkley at the 5 would actually be really interesting. I think a lot of guys
like, are we going to consider like traditional power forwards to be bigs, no matter what their size is?
I think so, but like, what's an extreme example you're thinking of here?
Well, again, since we brought up PJ Tucker, like Charles Barkley, or I mean, just these like the shorter guys that played the bigger.
Yeah, I think Barkley qualifies. And here's a point I was going to bring up. Like, I was kind of saving this, but like, I was going to say, like, there probably is certainly a correlation here between passing bigs and height. Like, what I am starting to observe anyway is that this is a skill you're more commonly seeing in the undersized bigs, which makes perfect sense because they don't have as much length to get the shots up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
agree with that. I think an important thing for us to do while we, this will probably be a decently long series that we're doing. I think that something that will be important is defining the different types of passers to be able to differentiate. I already mentioned Jokic as the unicorn. If Owen is wanting to put Magic and Bird in there, then go for it. But you know, just I think defining, because I think one thing we can define is certain play styles. So you know, I think that will be important going forward in this. I don't know what you guys think if defining,
Yeah,
these.
I think that's probably the best starting point, to be honest, because there's there's a progression to the evolution of big man passing that's it's relatively easy to follow if you look at the types of players as we start walking through history. I think it's fairly easy to see like why certain skills developed at certain times, or why someone was able to make a particular use of that at a certain time to counter what you're more commonly seeing in the competition.
Yeah, and there's going to be so many of these guys to cover. I know I've already watched about, I want to say 14 of them, and there's plenty more to go through. I think that,
Patrick Ewing doesn't count.
of course not. He lacks the vision.
He did that. Yeah. We're going to sit here talking about Oliver Miller. Come on.
Okay. There you go. Miller's a better passer than Ewing. I'm sorry. I actually watched a game where Miller and Ewing were playing in the same game. Miller was a better passer that game. Just so.
Yeah, how much attention does Oliver Miller draw?
So this
Well,
is
when Charles Barkley wasn't on the floor because he wasn't playing that game, Oliver Miller was drawing a decent amount of.
Nah, that was
I don't want.
Cedric Ceballos.
Well, it's because Oliver Miller was able to get Cedric Ceballos the ball. Cedric Ceballos was the center on that team. Okay, I'm kidding.
So this brings up a good point, because this is another important distinction here. Like there is a big difference between passing skill, or like your pure talent for passing the ball, which could be encompasses like touch, timing, a lot of different the pace that you're putting on it from different distances and stuff like that. There's a whole lot of variability in that.
Yeah. I just to keep it on Oliver Miller, I do think he has that passing skill. I think that's one of his. I think he's a passing big. I don't think that he's in the upper echelon of it. But I wanted to talk about him because I don't think he's talked about enough. That's why Owen brought up Oliver Miller. But yeah.
And there's guys like Ewing. Obviously Ewing is one who's much maligned for his passing ability, but the fact that he commands so much attention because of his ability to score the ball does mean he has some impact passing. If he can get it out of the double team, the fact that he has drawn it in the first place has some value.
Yeah, I agree. I think where the difference is that Ewing does lack some vision. I don't think he's. Yeah, I think he just lacks. I just think he lacks the basic vision to be called a passing big. He's a scorer to me, and I think that when he's doubled, then he can make the right pass. But sometimes I really don't think he does.
And here's my thing with this is, like, I know there are guys on this list who are also scorers. Hands down, that's what they are. They're scorers, but they just They pass a little bit better than maybe Patrick Ewing did, or a little bit more consistently. But on the scale, are they that much better?
Yeah. So back to Oliver Miller and Patrick Ewing. You're talking about how Oliver Miller has more passing skill, or at least how it is viewed that his passes are just more skilled. But like, is he actually warping the defense with a scoring threat like Ewing would be?
No, he's not. He's not exactly a scoring threat. I don't think he ever really was. I think you mentioned to me how Barkley wished that he was more of a scoring threat in the post. Was it, Owen?
Yep.
Yeah. That's just not who he was. And it's funny because I've watched a lot of Marcus Camby lately. Him and Oliver Miller are actually relatively similar.
All right, yeah. Camby entered the league at like 190 pounds.
No, I know. I'm talking about not how they look. In terms of where they are positioned on the court, I think they're pretty similar. And Camby's not exactly wowing anybody with his scoring. He's he's out on the perimeter just trying to create in ways. So,
well, I mean, that was an aspect of his game, but typically he was working, from the elbows. Always kind of stuck in the mid range to allow both like Carmelo or when he played with him Iverson to kind of get room to score inside.
What's funny is about, and I don't want to harp on this too long because we're gonna end up talking about these guys more in detail, anyways. With Camby, he seemed like he was looking to pass, and when he would move, he would go down along the baseline, and he'd just be kind of like analyzing, the floor, and it would almost be like he was hunting for offensive rebounds. That seemed like his main offensive arsenal to me. He had the jumper. When it went in, it looked good. When it didn't, it was pretty rough to watch. But yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too far into this, but that's just kind of how I saw Marcus Camby when I was watching him play. Very unique player. In
some ways, but he's also pretty similar to Joakim Noah and Bam Adebayo, honestly. They all kind of fit that passing hub type of role.
Yeah. No, I agree. I guess
Camby with a lot more attempts at like perimeter creation for some damn reason.
Yep. Hey, I've seen him throw a couple nice alley-oops to LaMarcus Aldridge in his Blazer years, so
we learned from Andre Miller.
Yeah. Yep, Andre Miller. So yeah, I mean, I think that we're still pretty far apart. Well, not exactly far apart, but I don't think we still actually know what a big is.
But we have a concept.
Because we do.
I mean, there's always a concept. There's always going to be some sort of name or player that doesn't necessarily fit, or a player who looks like they fit that actually doesn't. It's malleable.
Muggsy Bogues passing big. Thoughts?
Nah, I think Boykins.
I mean,
Boykins. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, he could, like, on my CYO team.
All right. Well, I think we're we've kind of talked about this at length for about 50 minutes now. Is there anything else that you guys want to mention regarding this, so that when we start this, we kind of can look back on this, know what we're talking about?
No, I mean, I think we touched on most things. There's always going to be some sort of disagreement or kind of like questions being brought up as we go along. Like, we may touch on something like, like LeBron James, honestly. But, I mean, most people really don't consider him to be a big, even though he's big. Basically Karl Malone size, who we probably will consider a big. It's going to be interesting.
Yep. It's going to be a fun series. I'm really looking forward to it myself. We've been talking about this for how many months now? At least 4 months, I'd say. So I'm definitely looking forward to beginning this. Chris, do you have any added thoughts?
No, I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about the fringes and stuff like that, but I mean, I'm most looking forward just to talking about actually the more traditional passing bigs that I don't think any of us would disagree with, and that's the hopefully we could spend most of our time talking about that instead of hovering around the conditions and splitting hairs over what exactly.
That's why I wanted. I think Owen wanted this as well. I just I think it would be better to have this as like a prologue episode almost, preview to what we're doing, so that we know. So people kind of have an idea of what we actually think a big is. So I definitely like doing this episode.
This clears the way so that we can actually focus on talking about the archetypes and
Yep.
the different passes that are valued from those archetypes. Like, I want to see some like Kareem or Wilt shovel passes.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll talk about them for sure.
Yeah, of course we'll talk about them. I'm ready to talk about Hot Plate Williams. I'm fired up to talk about Hot Plate Williams.
Good.
But
well, now that you've mentioned who he is, people can spend a little bit of time figuring it out,
preparing themselves. Yeah, they can check out his Basketball Reference page. So, I think
Oliver Miller and Hot Plate Williams. I'm seeing a trend.
Heavy passers.
Yep. So I think this is a good spot to conclude. Appreciate you guys coming on again. Make sure to follow us on Twitter at Mozart_of_hoops. Follow us on Instagram at Mozart of Hoops, all lowercase. You can follow me on Twitter at Ian Page Quinn. You can follow Chris on Twitter at Chamberlain Milt, I believe.
Yep.
And you can follow. You can also follow the new Twitter guy on the app. His dudeness NBA, I believe is what it is.
I haven't checked in like a month.
I don't check mine often either.
Yep. I mean that's actually a lie. You liked my Bob Lanier tweet the other day. So
yeah, okay.
Rest in peace to Bob Lanier, who is a passing big, by the way. Yep. So yeah, and we're on every single platform now, pretty much. I know we're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as the main ones. I do a video episode on YouTube where I include clips. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with how this podcast has started out so far. I hope you guys are all enjoying it out there. And until next time, peace.